Steve, I explained, I need some specialized outdoor speakers installed. Need them completely hidden in the shrubbery along the fence line here, I pointed, and wires run underground back to the garage, hooking up to a custom audio system. Steve looked at the area, then back at me, his expression neutral. Heavy-duty speakers? Yes, I said, and possibly a couple of small subwoofers. He raised a single eyebrow almost imperceptibly. For bird calls. Yeah, very realistic, immersive nature sounds, including atmospheric events. Steve nodded slowly. Right, atmospheric events. Okay, burying subs takes some careful digging. Make sure we don't hit irrigation lines. Rock speakers blend in okay for the mids and highs. Just show me the exact locations and where the wires terminate. What kind of nature sounds you play is your business. Steve was discreet. Perfect. My name is Dave. I live on a street called Whispering Willows Lane. Let me tell you, the willows might whisper, but some of the residents? Not so much. Or rather, they demand everyone else whisper, or better yet, cease emitting sound waves altogether. I work from home, wrestling databases into submission, which means my backyard isn't just a patch of grass. It's my escape pod. It's where I go to decompress, to feel the sun on my face, to listen to the birds, and, until recently, to enjoy the gentle, soothing tinkle of a set of modest bamboo wind chimes I hung from the eaves of my back porch. They weren't giant, clangy monstrosities forged in the fires of Mount Doom. They were tasteful, understated. They made a soft, woody clink-clonk sound when the breeze was just right. Think Enya, not Metallica. They were, to my mind, the auditory equivalent of a calming cup of herbal tea. Apparently, my next-door neighbor, Karen, disagrees. Karen operates under the assumption that the entire neighborhood is her personal library. And any sound above the level of dust settling is a violation of her fundamental right to absolute, soul-crushing silence. Her hearing is legendary. Rumor has it she once filed a complaint against the moon for excessive gravitational pull causing disruptive tides. She has previously taken issue with the aggressive frequency of my lawn sprinkler and the unnecessary exuberance of a robin building a nest near her prize-winning and eerily silent hydrangeas. So it was perhaps inevitable that the wind chimes would eventually end up in her crosshairs. It happened last Tuesday. Perfect afternoon. Slight breeze, just enough to stir the leaves and coax a gentle, intermittent clink-clonk from the bamboo chimes. I was on my porch swing, finally tackling that dense fantasy novel I'd been meaning to read. Buster, my golden retriever of advancing years and placid temperament, snoozing at my feet. Utter tranquility. Until Karen materialized at the low fence separating our yards. She wasn't yelling. She didn't have to. Her entire posture radiated agony. She held one hand pressed dramatically to her temple, the other clutching the fence rail like a drowning sailor clinging to driftwood. "David!" Her voice was a low, pained moan, as if uttering each syllable cost her dearly. "Please! Those chimes!" I lowered my book. Buster didn't even twitch. The chimes emitted a soft clonk. "The wind chimes, Karen?" I asked, genuinely perplexed. "They're barely making any noise. It's kind of nice, actually." "Nice?" she gasped, recoiling as if I'd suggested wrestling badgers was a relaxing pastime. "David, the incessant tinkling. It's erratic. It's high-pitched. It feels like tiny, invisible ice picks chipping away at my sanity. I'm trying to cultivate mindfulness out here." Mindfulness. Right. While simultaneously monitoring my porch decorations with the intensity of a NORAD radar operator. Incessant? Karen, the wind has to blow for them to even make a sound. And it's a soft sound. Bamboo? "It's noise pollution," she insisted, her voice rising slightly despite her apparent agony. It violates the very spirit of peaceful coexistence. It's utterly disruptive to my concentration, /nap, /communing with my inner chi. I think she cycles through her reasons depending on the day. You simply must take them down immediately. I tried logic. I tried reason. I pointed out their unobtrusive nature, their commonality as backyard decorations. I might as well have been debating quantum physics with a fence post. Karen was implacable. If you refuse to address this auditory assault voluntarily, David, she declared, drawing herself up, I will have no choice but to escalate the matter through official channels. She turned, clutching her head again for dramatic effect, and retreated into her hermetically sealed house, leaving me sitting there, book forgotten, listening to the gentle clink-clonk that had somehow become an instrument of torture. Tiny ice picks. Auditory assault? It was the sound of wind blowing through bamboo tubes. Henderson down the street fired up his industrial-grade leaf blower every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, sounding like a 747 taxiing for takeoff, and that was apparently acceptable ambient noise. But my gentle chimes? Noise pollution. This wasn't about the sound. This was about Karen's pathological need to control her environment, extending even into my environment. This was about the tyranny of the hypersensitive. A few days later, the email arrived, forwarded, inevitably, by the Oakwood Valley HOA's volunteer secretary, Gladys, who probably just hit forward all on anything Karen sent her. Subject, formal complaint regarding auditory disturbance, Lot 14. Inside, a scanned letter, ostensibly from the HOA Architectural and Environmental Committee, which I suspected consisted solely of Karen and maybe her cat, detailed the grievance. Persistent, high-frequency, intermittent noise, source identified as wind chimes, emanating from the rear porch area of Lot 14. It went on to quote some vague bylaw about maintaining neighborhood harmony and avoiding nuisance conditions. It concluded by strongly requesting that I take immediate steps to address the neighbors' concerns regarding auditory disturbances impacting their quiet enjoyment. No specific violation cited, no fine threatened yet. Just that oily, bureaucratic pressure to cave to the demands of the neighborhood noise Nazi. Address the concerns. Her concern was that reality wasn't silent enough for her. Fine. She didn't like the gentle, persistent, relaxing tinkling of bamboo. Maybe she'd prefer something else. Something less persistent. Something more startling. Something that didn't rely on the breeze. Something that announced its presence with authority. Something that might just make her jump right out of her ergonomic meditation cushion. An idea began to form. An idea sparked by righteous indignation and fueled by the memory of her tiny ice picks comment. An idea loud, sudden, and electric. She wanted quiet? I'd give her quiet. Most of the time. But when she came snooping near my property line, looking for new sounds to complain about? Oh, things were about to get loud. Very briefly, very loud. My first thought was simple payback. Maybe aim a speaker at her house and play recordings of other wind chimes. Only louder? Too obvious. Maybe set up one of those ultrasonic cat repellents she hates. Might bother Buster. Air horn? Too easily traceable. Definitely illegal. No, this needed to be cleverer. It needed plausible deniability, at least initially. It needed to be intermittent, avoiding those pesky sustained noise ordinances. And it needed to be triggered by her. She approaches my space. She gets the noise. Her fault, right? What kind of noise? Something natural, maybe? Something nobody could really complain about? A sudden dog bark? Nah, she'd blame Buster. A loud bird call? Maybe a hawk screech? Getting warmer? Then it hit me. What's a natural sound that is sudden, loud, makes everyone jump, and is utterly beyond human control? Thunder. Not the gentle rumble of distant storms. No, I'm talking about that sudden, sharp crack boom that happens right overhead, the kind that rattles windows and makes you spill your coffee. Imagine Karen, creeping along the fence line, straining her superhuman ears to detect the sound of my grass growing, and suddenly being met with a blast of simulated atmospheric fury erupting from my flower bed. Could I do it? Could I make thunder? Not real thunder, obviously, but high-fidelity, digitally recorded thunder? Absolutely. The internet is full of sound effect libraries. I could download dozens of different thunderclaps, sharp cracks, rolling booms followed by sizzles, deep rumbles. Variety would be key to maintaining the illusion and the annoyance factor. The delivery system? Powerful outdoor speakers, weatherproofed and hidden. A hefty amplifier to deliver the necessary sonic punch. And the trigger? Motion sensors. Passive infrared, PIR sensors, aimed with laser-like precision not at my whole yard, but only at the specific zones Karen frequented when she was on patrol near my property line. The path by her roses, the edge of her patio nearest my fence, the spot where she liked to stand and glare. I mentally dubbed these the Karen Approach Zones, or KAZs. She enters the KAZ, the system triggers, selects a random thunderclap file from the library, and blasts it for a second or two at high volume. Then silence. Was it real thunder, heat lightning, a sonic boom, a car backfiring? Who could say? Certainly not me. Thunder? Wow, Karen, that was a close one. Didn't hear a thing over here, though. Weird. Plausible deniability. Phase 1. I pulled up the city noise ordinances and the HOA rulebook again. Most regulations focused on sustained noise levels, X decibels for Y minutes, or noise during specific quiet hours, like 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. My thunderclaps would be incredibly brief, 1 or 2 seconds max. Even if loud, they wouldn't register as a sustained violation, and the beauty part, the legal gray area I intended to exploit with glee, was the trigger. She would be causing the noise by entering the KAZ. Could they fine me for a noise she initiated by her own movement? It felt deliciously, litigiously ambiguous. Project Thunderclap was go. Now, rigging up high-power outdoor audio synced to precisely aimed motion sensors isn't exactly plug and play. My technical skills max out around setting up a new router or maybe soldering a loose wire badly. I needed professionals who were good at their jobs, discreet, and hopefully possessed a sense of humor about weaponizing meteorology. First, the sound system itself. I needed someone who understood volume, impact, and weatherproofing. My search led me to Boomer Bob's Pro Audio. Bob's shop specialized in sound systems for rock bands, nightclubs, and home theater enthusiasts who believed bass should be felt in your internal organs. Bob himself was a large, cheerful guy with a booming laugh and probably some hearing loss. "Bob," I said, after navigating past stacks of speakers the size of small refrigerators, "I need an outdoor sound system with unusual requirements." "Unusual how?" Bob grinned, adjusting his hearing aid. "Need concert sound for your garden gnomes? Surround sound for your bird bath?" "Something like that," I said. "It needs to reproduce very specific, very brief, very loud impact sounds, with high fidelity. Think, a really close, sharp thunderclap." Bob's grin widened. "Thunderclaps? Outdoors? Hell yeah! You building the world's most intense haunted house? Or just trying to scare the bejesus out of the mailmen?" "Let's call it Dynamic Atmospheric Simulation for Enhanced Neighborly Awareness," I replied carefully. "Needs serious power handling, weatherproof speakers, including subs for that low-end rumble and a powerful amp." "Right on," Bob boomed. "We can hide some serious firepower in your landscaping. Weatherproof subs buried like landmines, Satellite speakers disguised as rocks or birdhouses. Hook 'em up to a monster amp in the garage. Oh yeah, we can make it sound like Zeus himself is having a tantrum in your azaleas. This is gonna be fun. Bob was, enthusiastically, on board. Next, the brains. I needed someone to handle the sensor integration, the Raspberry Pi controller, the randomization logic, the triggering mechanism. I called Sparky, the electronics whiz who'd helped my buddy Frank with his motion-activated bagpipe project. Yes, apparently suburban spite tech is a growing field. Sparky answered on the first ring. Sparky, it's Dave Parker. Need your expertise again for another custom notification system. Dave, hey man, what is it this time? Frank's bagpipes still driving that lady nuts? Different lady, similar problem. This time, instead of bagpipes, I need motion-activated thunderclaps. There was a pause. Then Sparky burst out laughing. Motion-activated thunder, seriously? Dude, you guys are killing me. First bagpipes, now thunder? What's next? Motion-activated Godzilla roars? Maybe, I laughed. But for now, just thunder. Random samples, very brief, very loud, triggered by directional PIR sensors. Easy peasy, man, Sparky said. Load up an SD card with high-quality thunder waves. Use the Pi to pick one randomly when the sensor fires. We gotta make sure the amp powers up instantly for that impact. Maybe use a relay triggered by the Pi. Weatherproofing the sensors is crucial, gotta get those housings sealed tight. Yeah, totally doable. Way cooler than fixing smart fridges. Sparky was in. Finally, the installation. Burying subwoofers and running conduit without attracting undue attention required skill. I called Stealthy Steve's Landscaping and Low Voltage. Steve was quiet, efficient, and rumored to be able to install an entire sprinkler system without leaving a single blade of grass out of place. Steve, I explained, I need some specialized outdoor speakers installed. Need them completely hidden in the shrubbery along the fence line here. I pointed, and wires run underground back to the garage, hooking up to a custom audio system. Steve looked at the area, then back at me, his expression neutral. Heavy-duty speakers? Yes, I said, and possibly a couple of small subwoofers. He raised a single eyebrow almost imperceptibly. For bird calls. Yeah, very realistic immersive nature sounds, including atmospheric events. Steve nodded slowly. Right. Atmospheric events. Okay, burying subs takes some careful digging. Make sure we don't hit irrigation lines. Rock speakers blend in okay for the mids and highs. Just show me the exact locations and where the wires terminate. What kind of nature sounds you play is your business. Steve was discreet. Perfect. Contracts were signed. Significant sums of money were transferred. The masters of mayhem were assembled. Project Thunderclap was moving forward. Installation day felt like a covert operation. Steve arrived first, quietly excavating precise holes, laying conduit, and positioning Boomer Bob's surprisingly heavy weatherproof speakers and subwoofers within my border shrubs, camouflaging them with mulch and existing foliage. Sparky followed, mounting the PIR sensors discreetly on small stakes hidden behind plants, using his laser pointer and a complex series of calculations to aim them precisely at the KAZs, Karen's patio edge, her rose path. Bob arrived last to install the monster amplifier in my garage, connecting it to Sparky's Raspberry Pi controller, which was now loaded with about 20 different high-quality Thunderclap recordings. There were, inevitably, near misses. While testing the sensor wiring, Sparky accidentally waved his hand in front of a live sensor. The amp wasn't fully calibrated yet, but it still let out a startlingly loud crack from a rock speaker. Tools clattered. Steve jumped. Mr. Henderson, 3 doors down, poked his head out his door. We quickly blamed a car backfiring down the street. I spent the rest of the day nervously watching Karen's windows, but she seemed oblivious, for now. That night, under the cover of suburban darkness, the real calibration began. Buster watched nervously from the porch door as I stood in the garage, phone app open, ready to conduct my symphony of simulated storms. First, volume. I manually triggered Thunderclap _sample _01.wav. Sharp crack near strike. The resulting sound was biblical. My garage door vibrated. Dishes rattled in the kitchen cupboards. Every dog in a 3-mile radius erupted in a cacophony of panicked barking. Lights flicked on up and down the street. I slammed the virtual volume slider down. Okay, note to self. Boomer Bob's definition of moderate volume differs significantly from mine. After much tweaking, I found a level that was genuinely startling and loud if you were standing right next to the speakers, but dissipated enough over distance to be merely confusing, not deafening, to the rest of the neighborhood. Plausible deniability required some plausibility. Next, sensor tuning. This took hours, creeping around my own backyard like a burglar, testing the trigger zones. Initial tests were frustrating. A large raccoon investigating my recycling bin set off a rolling boom. A particularly strong gust of wind rustling the leaves near a sensor triggered a sharp crack. Sparky had anticipated this and built fine-tuning controls into the app. I adjusted sensitivity, narrowed the detection angles, masked off sections of the sensor's view using tiny pieces of electrical tape. Slowly, painstakingly, I got them dialed in. Human-sized object, moving within the specific KAZ, then trigger. Squirrels? Ignored. Wind? Ignored. Karen stepping out to berate a non-existent noise source? Target acquired. Finally, randomization. Sparky's code worked beautifully. Each trigger pulled a different Thunderclap file from the library, ensuring Karen wouldn't get used to one specific sound. Sometimes a sharp crack, sometimes a rolling boom, sometimes a crackle and rumble combo. Keep 'em guessing. Inevitably, during one late-night sensor test where I perhaps hadn't lowered the volume quite enough after the initial shock, the flashing blue and red lights arrived. Officer Chen, looking like she drew the short straw yet again, stepped out of the cruiser. "Mr. Parker," she sighed, flashlight beam sweeping my suspiciously pristine landscaping. "Evening. Getting noise complaints again. Caller reported what sounded like a bomb going off, or maybe a tree exploding. Time to deploy the cover story." "An explosion? Good heavens, Officer Chen, no!" I adopted my most concerned yet innocent expression. "Didn't hear a thing over here myself, perfectly quiet. Maybe someone's leftover fireworks. Or heat lightning. It's been strangely warm." Chen shone her light directly on one of the rock speakers, lingering for a moment. My heart hammered, but she couldn't prove anything. "Right," she said, her voice flat. "Heat lightning. Look, Mr. Parker, we're getting a lot of unusual noise calls centered around this address lately. Just try to keep the meteorological phenomena under control, okay?" She got back in her car and left, leaving me sweating slightly but relieved. The system was ready. The trap was set. I waited. I took down the offending wind chimes, making a show of wrapping them carefully and putting them in a box in the garage. Let Karen think she'd won the first battle. Let her bask in the unnatural silence. Let her guard down. 2 days later, she took the bait. It was a sunny, cloudless afternoon. Perhaps emboldened by the lack of tinkling, she ventured out her back door, trowel in hand, heading towards her prize roses near the fence line, right into Kaz Zone 1. She took 1 step onto the garden path, 2 steps. Her foot landed squarely within the sensor's invisible boundary. Crack boom! The sound was instantaneous, sharp, and incredibly loud right where she was standing. It erupted from the rock speaker hidden not 10 feet away. Karen screamed, a high-pitched, terrified sound, threw her trowel in the air, and literally leaped backwards, stumbling and falling onto her perfectly manicured lawn, The sound vanished as quickly as it came. Silence rushed back in, amplifying the shock. Karen sat there on the grass, chest heaving, eyes wide with terror, staring wildly at the clear blue sky. Then, slowly, her head turned, and her gaze locked onto my house, onto my back porch where I was definitely not peeking through the blinds, shaking with suppressed laughter. Oh, this was better than wind chimes. So much better. The rain of thunder began. It wasn't constant, which was the beauty of it. It was unpredictable. Karen would tentatively step onto her patio. Silence. She'd relax. Maybe start to water a plant near the fence. Boom! Rolling rumble variant. She'd quickly retreat indoors. Later, she might dash out to grab something she left on her grill. Crack. Sharp crack variant. She became a prisoner in her own backyard. She started moving in short, jerky bursts, constantly scanning the sky, flinching at every car door slam or distant siren. She stopped tending her roses near the fence altogether. She took to peering out her windows with binoculars, trying to spot hidden speakers or weather control devices. She complained to neighbors, who mostly just looked confused. Thunder? But it's sunny, Karen. Her reputation as the neighborhood eccentric solidified. And the police calls? Oh, they continued. But now they were tinged with desperation and, frankly, delusion. He's doing it, she'd insist frantically to Officers Miller and Chen, who now responded with the weary resignation of saints dealing with a particularly trying sinner. He has some kind of thunder machine. He's controlling the weather. It only happens when I go near his fence. Miller would sigh. Sir, he'd say to me, standing on my porch while Karen gesticulated wildly from her own yard. Your neighbor is making some rather unusual meteorological claims. She believes you are generating artificial thunderclaps specifically targeted at her. I'd put on my best concerned neighbor face. Artificial thunder? Targeted at her? Officers, that's deeply worrying. Is she feeling okay? Maybe the stress? Or, I don't know, atmospheric pressure changes affecting her inner ear? Perfectly calm and quiet over here, just enjoying this lovely weather. They couldn't find anything. They couldn't hear anything while they were there. My denial was absolute. Karen sounded increasingly like she needed a tinfoil hat. Eventually, they started warning her. Ma'am, Chen said gently, but firmly one afternoon, we cannot investigate weather. We have no evidence Mr. Parker is creating any disturbance. If these unfounded calls continue, we will have to consider issuing a citation for misuse of emergency services. Karen was left sputtering, trapped in a localized thunderstorm of her own making. But Karen, bless her persistent heart, had one final weapon, the HOA. Armed with her shaky phone recordings, which mostly just captured her screaming after a loud bang, and possibly another expensive report from Acme Acoustic Consulting, she forced an emergency hearing of the Oakwood Valley HOA Board. The charge, not just noise, but deliberate auditory harassment via simulated meteorological events. You had to admire her vocabulary, at least. I attended the hearing, feeling strangely calm. Sparky came along as my technical consultant, mostly just to look official and maybe confuse the board with jargon if needed. Karen presented her case with the fervor of a prosecuting attorney, playing her clips, detailing her trauma, demanding the immediate dismantling of my weather weapon, and significant financial compensation for her suffering. Then it was my turn. I decided to ditch the plausible deniability. The consultant's report likely pinpointed the speakers anyway. Time for the justification defense. Board members, Miss Peterson, I began calmly. Yes, there is a sound system installed on my property. Yes, it is capable of producing sounds resembling thunder. Yes, it is triggered by motion sensors. Gasps from the board. Karen nodded triumphantly. However, I continued, holding up a hand. Let's be very clear about the operational parameters. This system only activates when a person enters a very specific, narrow zone immediately adjacent to my property line, near the shared fence. It is essentially a high-tech auditory boundary marker, a no trespassing sign you can hear. "It's harassment!" Karen shrieked. "Is it?" I countered. "The sound is brief, less than 2 seconds. It doesn't violate city noise duration ordinances. It mimics a natural sound. And most importantly, Miss Peterson controls it. If she wishes for silence, she simply needs to refrain from approaching my property line in that specific area. It's a feedback system, triggered entirely by her own actions." The board looked flummoxed. Brenda McNally, yes, she was on this board too, naturally, started quoting bylaws about nuisance noise, but I countered with the lack of persistent sound and the trigger mechanism. Their lawyer, consulted via phone yet again, likely advised them that regulating brief, triggered sounds, especially those mimicking nature and initiated by the complainant's own movement, was a legal minefield. Could they really fine me for noise Karen herself caused by walking near my fence? After much confused deliberation, the board arrived at a typically weak HOA compromise. They couldn't force removal based on the current rules. They issued a strong recommendation that I disable the system or change the sound to something less startling. They fined me $50 for unapproved modification to landscaping, for burying the speakers, and they vowed, yet again, to form a subcommittee to draft new bylaws covering triggered auditory deterrent systems. I paid the $50 fine. Did I disable the system? Not entirely. Did I change the sound? Well, Sparky helped me add a few more options to the Raspberry Pi's library via the secret app. Now, depending on my mood and Karen's level of annoyingness that day, her approach might trigger a brief thunderclap, a loud cow mooing, a foghorn blast, or maybe just that gentle, tinkling wind chime sound she hated so much in the first place, only amplified slightly. Variety is the spice of life, after all. Life on Whispering Willows Lane settled into a new, strange equilibrium. Karen is now extremely cautious about where she walks in her own backyard. She gives my shrubbery wide berth. The neighborhood mostly ignores the occasional, inexplicable boom or moo emanating from my property. I can finally relax on my back porch again. The wind chimes are gone, but there's a different kind of peace. The peace of knowing that absolute silence is no longer mandatory, and that any disruption is now entirely self-inflicted by the person who demanded silence in the first place. I lean back in my chair, listening to the actual birds chirping, Buster snoring softly at my feet. I glance over at Karen's house. Her curtains twitch. I smile and discreetly tap the app on my phone. Maybe just a quick test of the foghorn sample. Just to make sure everything's still working, of course.